Welcome back, everybody. Our final video on archetypes, in which we're going to learn what it really means to integrate your opposite. We made it. The concluding video in our series on archetypes starts right now. We're going to go through a few key points to extract from the past 5 videos on archetypes and talk about what it really means to integrate the archetype that is opposite, whichever one you feel more natural in, the most natural in. First, though, I really want to drive home a point. I've been watching the past 5 videos that we made in this series. By the way, this is not going to be the last series or the last video on archetypes. This is going to be the last video of this series. There's going to be more videos coming, not next week, but in the future. There's just a lot to talk about when it comes to archetypes, but I really want to drive home this key point. The analogy that I brought up in the introduction video, the difference between understanding our emotions, understanding our anger and anxiety, the 3 different decisions we can make with each one of those emotions. Understanding that process and how it relates to our archetypes, the cross, the mandala, the quaternity, reconciling our existence with reality. This is the car. Managing unconscious emotions, using them in a productive way in reality for the purpose of forming a boundary, for the purpose of individuating, for developing an identity based on your decisions. That is getting your car running as well as you possibly can. This is the map. This tells you where to go or where you could go if you wanted to. That's the idea here. This is fundamental. Managing your emotions, developing your boundary, which I didn't draw in here this week. This is fundamental, but it does help to know where you could possibly go. Is that clear? Okay, good. Now the takeaways. The conclusion to archetypes, Ouroboros. For my first point, talked about this a couple weeks ago in the Animus Air podcast. The Ouroboros, this snake eating its own tail. 5% of its tail, no more. You could do less, but definitely no more than 5%. This is how we move. This is how we move from one quadrant of the quaternity to another quadrant as quickly as we possibly can. And another way of saying this, I know I've done this before, but we have an XY axis. We can also do a Z axis, which I so cleverly draw as a dotted line to show depth, to show the Z axis. Now where you want to be, and this is conscious, unconscious. And like you want to be at the center of both the X and Y axis, you want to be at the center of your conscious and unconscious, meaning you are conscious as you are exploring the depths of your unconscious. There is your line of discomfort. It's right here in front of you, and you just step over that 5%. You're not sure what's going to happen, and that is how we achieve the Ouroboros state. That's not the proper usage, but I think you guys know what I mean. That's how we achieve the Ouroboros state, and that's how we can move from quadrant to quadrant as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And that is what? That is taking our unconscious anxiety, our unconscious anger, anxiety, confronting it in a pro-social way, anger, asserting it in a pro-social way. That is how we move along the map as well as we possibly can. The reconciliation. Now, you may be looking at this quaternity, this cross, this mandala, and think, oh, well, if I do more analytical decisions over here, more masculine kinds of decisions over here, I am going to be not as good at making intuitive decisions. Like this is a dial, and you can either go back and forth. That's not really the way of thinking about this. This is not zero sum. The better you get at analytical decisions does not make you any worse at intuitive decisions, and vice versa. This is not a dial. This is, here's a good analogy, this is the game Topple. Remember that game Topple from 1989? You have to like balance out the board, and if you put too many pieces over on this on this corner, you had to balance it out over here. Think of this. Think of the quaternity, the cross, the mandala as Topple. There's a point here holding it up right at the individuation point, and if you get too much analytical decision, if you fill this up too much, which we're going to get to next, it doesn't take away from this. It's not zero sum. You just have to, I've been spending too much time alone reading books. It's time to go out and talk to people, ask them about themselves, get experience to balance out my intellect. And same thing with compassion and confidence. Just because you get more compassion by managing your anxiety, or managing your anger, that doesn't take away from your confidence. Now, it is going to be more helpful to get confidence to the extent that you have compassion. And another way of thinking of this in the context of the quaternity, which we talked about last week, is think of compassion as feeling connected with other people, connected with your career, money, any other category of importance in your life. Go back to my video on Archetypes, on the Oedipus complex. As you get more connected, now you need to separate by getting more confidence. This is creating a boundary, and this is joining your boundary with others, both done in a healthy way. But just because you join your boundary with others in a healthy way, no way takes away from your boundary, from your individual boundary. This is not zero sum. So this, if you see this as zero sum, you see trying to be individuated as a battle between two opposite halves of you. They're not opposite. Confidence is another way of looking at compassion. Compassion, another way of looking at confidence. An intellectual, ethical, principled, top-down decision is just another way of looking at an intuitive decision. And we master our decisions, we master our emotions by doing them by making the decision that satisfies both at the same time. So making an intuitive decision in an analytical way, and vice versa. Fill them up. How do you fill up each of these? Well, we know how to fill up compassion and confidence. Fill up our compassion by getting our needs met. That's going to be how you do it. You fill up your confidence by confronting your anxiety, by looking at the threats of your life. Look at people who you are avoiding. Look at issues that you're avoiding, talking with those people about. Yeah, who are you not confronting? Who in your life are you not confronting in the way that you need to? That's how you're going to fill up compassion and confidence. And how do we fill up analytical, principle, top-down, more masculine, typically decision-making, is we learn principles, we read books. We read books. This is spending time alone in your room reading, in your apartment reading. And this is how do we fill up our intuition, is we get experience. Go out and talk to people, meet people, ask people what they've done to get to where we want to go. And then the final point here is your significant other is going to be the opposite of where you find yourself naturally. So the typical way of viewing this is the man is the warrior and the woman is the lover. This is typically the most masculine archetype, and this is the lover, typically the most feminine archetype. Not that you can't be a masculine guy and also be a lover, but typically how we see these things is the man's the warrior, the woman's the lover, and that's how they combine. And what do you do in a relationship? You're essentially joining your boundaries together. So a great way to integrate your opposite isn't to just become a lover. If you're a warrior, it's going to be pretty much next to impossible anyway. But you find somebody who's the opposite of you. Just for example, me and my wife, like I said, I'm probably down here naturally, and she's probably here. So we're not actually opposite, but we can both do what? Go to the other quadrant when we want. She can go over here. I've noticed this just recently. We're moving in a couple weeks to California, and we're planning the road trip. Well, I'm not planning anything. She's doing the planning, and I notice as she goes from lover to, well, queen for her, she plans more, right? She gets more concrete. She gets more specific about what needs to be done. I find myself much more comfortable here in the magician archetype. And then when I get more concrete, I see what happens to her. She can be more in the lover archetype. And that's really the ultimate point about this quaternity, archetypes, learning about how to move about the map. Not that you don't move about the map in the best way possible, by doing the Ouroboros thing, by eating your own tail 5%, by confronting your anxiety, by asserting your anger. Of course you do that, but ultimately the way to integrate your opposite is to find it in somebody else. And the healthiest way to do that isn't to integrate your opposite. Like, so if you're a warrior, you don't live as the lover, but you understand when you need to integrate that archetype. Like, you're very directed, very focused, but you do need to reach out and create emotional connections with people, preferably your girlfriend. And then you can do that and then go right back to warrior. So you don't live here, but you integrate here. And if you're a warrior, your lover or girlfriend is going to be is going to be important for her to integrate her warrior when she needs to, but ultimately she can just rest easy here. And that's really how we reconcile these things, isn't by being it ourselves, but by finding it in somebody else. And I think this comes down to a fundamental view of human nature that a lot of people, especially in psychology, don't support as much anymore, is that we can't really be complete on our own. We can do it. It's possible. But in order to really become individuated, it's about, getting really comfortable with yourself, creating who you are within the context of the quadrant where you're most comfortable, and then using that to integrate somebody who is in the opposite quadrant. And I'm going to have way more on archetypes to say, but we will end this series here. Maybe we'll start a new series that's going to be more than a couple weeks, maybe in a couple months. But in the meantime, like and subscribe. Tell a friend about this. Talk with your friend about this. Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? Are they the opposite archetype? Or like with me and my wife, are pretty close to opposite. I mean, we can both go back and forth here. I know she doesn't do here very well. I don't do here very well. So we definitely counterbalance each other in that respect, like the game Topple. But yeah, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching this series on archetypes. We'll be back next week with a very interesting way of looking at therapy. I can't wait. This is a great idea for a video. And that is it for archetypes. And always remember that the way to integrate your opposite archetype, your opposite quadrant, is to go out and meet her.